introduce Dr. Rozin and off we go. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Pam. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Paul Rozin, who's a professor of psychology at the University of Pennsylvania. He's the world's leading expert on disgust, and his current work focuses in part on the psychological, cultural, and biological determinants of human food choice. Dr. Rozin earned a bachelor's degree from the University of Chicago in 1956, a doctoral degrees in biology and psychology from Harvard University in 1961. In 1963, he joined the psychology department at the University of Pennsylvania. So as his current teaching and research interests include the study of the acquisition of likes and dislikes for foods, the cultural evolution of disgust, the ambivalence toward animal foods, and the lay conception of risk of infection and toxic effects of foods. I know that I'm most curious to hear about the notion of disgust, particularly as it relates to food choices. Which foods one finds to be disgusting can seem quite surprising and is highly influenced by one's cultural context. Interestingly, this learned behavior is not seen in very young children, but is expressed by older children and adults in a very distinctive way that's understood by the others around them. So we'll learn about reactions when new foods are first introduced into a culture, such as chocolate, peppers, and tomatoes. Disgust links one's thoughts, emotions, and visceral reactions in a unique way. It's a fascinating area that I know little about, and I'm really interested in learning more. And I'm so curious to know how in the world Dr. Rozin got involved in that area of research. So with no further ado, let me turn this over to Dr. Paul Rozin.
Okay, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. So let me say, I'm not going to be talking about disgust. That's
Okay.
another talk, and I'd be happy to talk about it. Just to answer your question, I got interested in it because meat is the principal source of disgust, and it is both the most favorite and most tabooed food in humans. So that combination of things got me interested. I'll tell you one other thing I'm not going to talk about that might interest you as culinary people, which is basically the order of foods in a typical Western meal, that is appetizer, entree, dessert, how that got to be that way, and what are some problems with that ordering psychologically. So I'm not going to talk about either of those. I'm talking today about the Columbian Exchange and 3 examples of it and their culinary effects. So let me start with the term Columbian Exchange, but first of all, I have to be able to move my screen down. You know, nothing works quite right the way, there it goes. Okay, so the Columbian Exchange refers to the fact that post-Columbus, 1492 and on, a great number of foods moved to America, from America to Eurasia and Africa, and vice versa. The greatest culinary mixing in the history of humans. So here are some of the foods that went from the Americas to Eurasia and Africa: chocolate, vanilla, chili peppers, tomatoes, potatoes, squash, peanuts, manioc, corn, and cashews, and turkey, the only animal that went that way. That's quite a pile of foods, and it's really, if you think of the foods of the Eastern Hemisphere, it's hard to imagine them without those foods that arrived after 1500. There are also 4 other foods that were already in the Eastern Hemisphere, but where the Western Hemisphere became a major source of supply: sugar through sugar cane, cotton, coffee, and wheat. And just for the record, to be fair, everyone wants to be fair these days and give everyone equal time. Here are some of the major foods that came from the Eastern Hemisphere to our hemisphere: wheat, rice, pork, beef, lamb, chicken, goats, citrus fruits, coffee and tea, sugar cane, apricots, pineapples, bees, and almonds, eggplant, broccoli, cucumber, and cauliflower. So there was a really massive exchange. These things just didn't exist in either part. So I'm going to talk about 3 of these foods which have a particular culinary interest and a psychological interest. One is um, chili pepper. Before I do, I want to give a framework on cuisine, and this is a cookbook which some of you may know, also called Ethnic Cuisine, the Flavor Principle Cookbook, by my departed wife, Elizabeth Rozin. And in that book, which has a theory of cuisine, she points out that most of the dishes in most of the world's cuisines, not all, but most, can be analyzed into staples. For example, in China, that would be rice. Cooking techniques, in China, that would be stir fry, and what she calls flavorings or flavor principles. In China, the combination of soy sauce, ginger root, and rice wine. And these flavorings characterize a cuisine and are placed on virtually every savory dish in the cuisine. In case of China, those flavor principles are supplemented with things like sesame oil and hot pepper, depending on the region of China. So if you want to, she points out, if you want to make a food that is not particularly Chinese, a staple, tastes Chinese, you basically say, take a potato, which is not much part of Chinese cuisine, and you stir fry it using soy sauce, ginger root, and rice wine, and it will taste Chinese to Chinese people. Okay, so I want to take a discussion now of one of the substances in the Columbian exchange, chili pepper. Now, this is from the diary of Christopher Columbus, January 15th, 1493. And he says, toda la gente no come sin ella, que le haya muy sana. They eat nothing without it and deem it very wholesome. And one of the early Spanish people in Mexico, who Bernardo de las Casas, who wrote about it, said, without chili, they do not think they are eating. So this is a really fundamental piece, not just a Western Hemisphere food, but a central food in Mexico. Now, chili peppers originated in both Brazil and Mexico. They were cultivated and domesticated in Mexico for sure. They got to the Eastern Hemisphere from Mexico, originally into Spain, and they moved into other parts of Europe, not too much in Europe. Hungary is the most interesting place where they went, which I'll tell you about. They went to West Africa, India, Southeast Asia, Southern China, and the Indonesia and islands in that area. And they became a fundamental part of the cuisines, of the flavor principles of all these countries. And so East Africa too, by the way. Okay, so just quickly, the chili history in Mexico. There are 4 species of chili that people eat. Capsicum annuum is the main species, the species that most of the chilies you're familiar with are. The consumption goes back in the archaeological record as far back as 9,000 years in Mexico. And they were cultivated between 5,000 and 7,000 years ago. Cultivation began, and Columbus and Cortez, Columbus actually brought some back from the Caribbean islands, and Cortez from Mexico. Now, this is an Aztec manuscript, and what you see here is a native of Mexico punishing a child by holding the child over a fire of burning chili peppers. And that, of course, is going to irritate the child's eyes. It'll burn. So the odd thing is that these people who love to eat this stuff in their mouth find that the molecules in their eye are very unpleasant, producing essentially the same kind of burn that they get in their mouth. I did research on chili pepper in Mexico. This is a little town near Oaxaca, Mexico, on the plateau of Mexico, which is an agricultural town, which chili pepper is essential. And one thing about the town that's interesting is that the animals, the domesticated animals, which come, by the way, from the Eastern Hemisphere, cows, dogs, and pigs are running around the area freely all the time. That's going to turn out to be relevant. Okay, so here is the traditional way of treating chili pepper in Mexico. It is ground daily into a salsa made typically of tomatoes and chili peppers, often salt, sometimes garlic, often a number of different kinds of chili pepper. According to Elizabeth Rosin's book, there are two flavor principles of Mexico. One is chili pepper and lime. Lime, by the way, coming from the Eastern Hemisphere. And the other is chili pepper and tomatoes, both coming from native to Mexico. Here is a little stand in the village, which is, I'm showing you this, but it's unusual. They're selling slices of pineapple, and there's a bowl there in red of hot pepper. Now, I'm telling you that because that's unusual. It's unusual for them to put chili pepper on desserts or on beverages. It goes on savory foods. This is a list of the aromatic compounds. You're not supposed to read this. You're supposed to just be impressed by how long it is. These are the aromatic compounds known to be in chili peppers. So there's a tremendous amount of aroma. It isn't just burn. It's an experience of many, many aromas. It's complicated in the way wine is, and Mexicans treat it that way. Mexicans treat different chili peppers as appropriately different for different dishes. So here, for example, in one woman's house in this village, I asked her to take out all the chili peppers she had in her kitchen. And they don't keep a lot of stuff because they buy stuff in markets every day. And what you see here is 6 different chili peppers. The last thing on your left is a tomato, a Mexican jitomate. But so this woman is using 6 different chili peppers on a daily basis. Here is the chili pepper market in the city of Oaxaca. And this is just the dry chili stalls. And each of those little baskets has a different chili pepper. And people come in and order particular combinations of peppers. It isn't that you add chili pepper to food or to a salsa. You add particular chili peppers in particular amounts. Now, the active ingredient in chili pepper that makes it burn is called capsaicin. It is found primarily in the placenta and seeds of the pepper. That is, the placenta is what connects the seeds to the body of the fruit inside the pepper. There are at least 5 natural forms of capsaicin, which I will describe in a moment. And they were used in Mexico and later in Europe as a medicine to treat soreness, cramps, etc. They're also used, of course, as a major food flavoring in Mexico. The capsaicin is an irritant. It stimulates salivation, blood flow. It stimulates an inflammatory response. It stimulates gastric secretion. In some sense, it's what's called cholinergic. It causes sweating on the face and neck only. You may have noticed this. You don't get sweating on the rest of the body, just the face and neck. And it does have a reaction to reduce heart rate, to activate gastric function, which is called a cholinergic action. It's poorly absorbed, so most of it is passed in your feces, doesn't get into your bloodstream. And that counts for Hungarian saying, paprika burns twice, because it burns in your mouth and it burns again in your anus. I mentioned the cholinergic. Here are 5 different versions of capsaicin. There are the molecules. They're very similar. They're found in different amounts in different chili peppers. And some of them burn quickly. That is to say, you feel the burn very quickly, and others take a low time to build up. Some come in the back of your mouth. Some come more in the middle of your mouth or your lips. You must have noticed when you've eaten hot peppers. Someone says this is really hot, and you say, no, it isn't. And you say, whoa, yes, it is. It's a slow burn, and sometimes it's in different parts of your mouth. This is a typical family of 4 children eating lunch in the Mexican village I worked in. And notice that the typical lunch is tortillas, which you can see, a bowl of black beans, some salt in the foreground, and the kids are dipping their tortillas with beans into the bowl of chili pepper salsa in the middle of the table. And this family, even the 5-year-old, is dipping his tortilla. And the reason this is interesting is that people do not like chili pepper when they first have it. The burn in the mouth is innately aversive. And yet it's probably, except for garlic, the most widely used spice in the world. Here is a little store in the village, the only store in this village, selling soda, no refrigerator. And they're selling these little packets you can see on the left, which are, most of them are sugar and fruit, like lime and sugar. But the one on the extreme left, the darkish red, is chili pepper and salt. And people buy those and eat them. I was astonished that they would take that over a sugar little packet, which is innately positive that everybody likes. So I bought a whole bunch of those. The woman had to go to the market in Oaxaca to get enough for me. So I could test many hundreds of people in the village on which of those they like, because they eat all of them, they sell all of them. And so I would put out all 5 of them on a little box or something, and I'd ask each person, children and adults, pick the one you want and you can have it, okay? And what I found was interesting, that little kids, 2 to 3, 4, this is the percent of people who pick the hot one out of the 5. So that's, you'd expect if they were picking at random, they'd pick the 1 out of 5, 20% of the time. You can say the little kids don't pick the hot one, but after age 5, there's a strong preference for the hot one over the sweet ones. It's about the same in men and women. Okay, we don't know how people get to like chili. It's one of my, it's not so much now, but it was one of my main research interests. How could people get to like something they don't like? But I will say social influence is a major thing. Eating it around the table, the little kid is eating it, everyone else is eating it and enjoying it. Kid sees that. They tend to get to like it stronger and stronger up to a certain point, and then adults stay at that strong level. They tend to say it enhances flavor. People who originally eat chili pepper say, it tastes so strong I can't taste anything else. But after you eat it a while, I'm sure many of you have this experience, that you say, no, it's part of the flavor. It makes something taste better in general. And they spread the context in which they're eating, the different foods that they enjoy it in. Some people, but not all, like the pure burn. That is to say that if you take a low level of capsaicin and put it in your mouth, people like that burn. Some people don't. And generally Mexicans don't particularly like the pure burn without the culinary context for it. By the way, if you have questions, any of you, as I go along, please ask. I asked people in the village, did you have any animals that like chili pepper? Because the pigs and the dogs eat chili pepper. They eat the garbage every day, and the garbage includes the tortillas that were not consumed, the stale tortillas, and the salsa that was not consumed. So the dogs are basically eating Mexican food, and the pigs are. So I said, do you have any animals that like them? And they said, no. That was a silly question. Of course the animals don't like them. So I said, would you mind if I tested? They said, no. So we went around the village. This is one of the Mexican boys in the village, offering tortillas with and without hot sauce to animals. Here's a dog getting presented with, this is a Cheeto actually, American cheese snack, with one with hot sauce, one without, and we would just see which one they took. Now they all took them both because they're hungry and they eat the garbage, but no one of them preferred the hot one to the plain one. Everyone in the village, every person over 5 would prefer the hot one to the plain one, but none of the animals did. So this is a uniquely human preference for hot pepper. Now we call this, we don't know exactly how it happens, but one feature seems to be what we call benign masochism, which is enjoying the fact that the body is telling you not to eat something or not to do something, and you know it's actually safe. So you're sort of, it's mind over body. So this is very common in humans and virtually absent in animals. Not just, now birds eat chili pepper, but they don't taste it, but mammals don't. So one example culinarily is irritant spices like ginger, black pepper, and chili pepper. They are innately negative. Bitter foods like coffee. Bitter is innately negative. People get to love it. Very hot or cold foods. Little children don't like very hot or cold foods, but people get to love them. Many people in the world adults don't like cold foods, by the way. The people in the Mexican village didn't like cold foods, and they didn't have cold soda for that reason. Thrill rides, roller coasters. There your body is saying, get out of here. Your heart is pounding. This is not good for you. And people enjoy the fact that they know they're not crashing to death. People enjoy very hot baths that are painful. And by the way, very cold temperatures too, when they jump into the water sometimes. They enjoy physical exhaustion like marathons and workouts. Their body is saying, stop this, I have no more resources, and they enjoy that. They enjoy disgust. It's like disgusting jokes, big source of humor. And they enjoy sad events. They like to go to movies, plays, look at paintings, listen to sad music. Many people enjoy crying at those events, so they're enjoying the negativity. So this is all quite remarkable. And it's a very frequent, very common feature of humans, first discovered as a phenomenon in chili pepper in humans by myself and colleagues. Okay, so we have a preference for chili pepper in which our biology, which is to not eat this, is opposed by cultural mechanisms which make it attractive. There's an innate aversion to irritant taste. Exposure to chili pepper produces liking. We don't know how, partly social transmission, perhaps also by benign masochism. Chili pepper were cultivated with varying irritant properties. They were incorporated into cuisine as a flavor principle, and they're eaten daily now by billions of people daily and loved. I should say that it was an unlikely spread. Why would anything that tastes so bad become the second most common spice in the world? It went from Mexico, perhaps Brazil, to Europe. The Hungarians bred sweet peppers. That is, they took hot peppers and they bred them and they got the burn out. And that, of course, is what we call sweet peppers. Sweet peppers are not nearly as popular in most of the world as hot peppers, but of course they are in Europe and the Mediterranean. So they become part of the Mediterranean flavor principle in the sofrito, made with chili pepper, olive oil, and sweet peppers, sometimes hot peppers too. But the hot form of the peppers went to Africa, Central Africa, West and East Africa, Middle East, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and East Asia, and with Korea being one of the big consumers of hot pepper. Why? Why did they adopt it? We don't know. One possibility is they were already eating black pepper in their cuisines, which produces a milder but similar burn, different aroma, of course. And black pepper is expensive, difficult to grow. Chili pepper is easy to grow, so it may have been a substitute for black pepper. But then we have the question, why did they eat black pepper? So we really don't know. Who would have said, having experienced this food in Mexico in the 15th century, 16th century, that this was going to be a big hit in the world? Amazing surprise. Now we're going to take the opposite case in a way. Chocolate is something that everybody loves the first time they eat it, unlike chili pepper, which nobody loves. Now chocolate comes from Mexico, and this is a Mexican painting of chocolate being consumed. That's the pot with the frothing in the middle of it is the way the chocolate was prepared. It was prepared with chili pepper. So you have really bitter, chocolate's really bitter when it comes out of the pod. You have a really bitter, innately negative food cooked with another innately negative food, chili pepper. Remarkable. This is just to illustrate the spread of chocolate in the Eastern Hemisphere, this being a 18th century picture in Spain Okay, and there's chocolate in those pots. Now, this is where chocolate is grown today. And you'll notice that a lot of it is grown in Africa and Asia, where it didn't come from. It's a tropical plant. Chili pepper, by the way, is not a tropical plant. It grows in the tropics. It grows in temperate and tropics. It doesn't grow in climates that have a very short summer, like northern tomato. So Northern Europe, for example, has some trouble growing chili pepper and tomato, but none of the tropical areas can grow chocolate. This is the chocolate growing countries of the world in 2001 too. The Cote d'Ivoire in West Africa, highest, Indonesia and Ghana, the next two sources. And this is chocolate consumption per capita. In the world, it's 0.5 kilograms, which is roughly a pound a year. Europe is 1.86, the highest intake. The Americas next, 1.20, where they come from, where it comes from. Africa and Oceania, very low in Asia. And so chocolate has not, the way chili pepper has, penetrated to most people living in the world, Africa and Asia. Asia contains 60% of living people. Here are some chocolate pods as they're harvested. And I just want to say a few things about this now. There are three great hot beverages in the world, as you know. Here's a 17th century drawing which shows them. On the left, you have a Middle Easterner representing coffee, showing coffee, which is where it comes from. In the center, Chinese with tea, and on the right, a Mexican holding chocolate. These are three beverages. They're the three major hot beverages of the world. What's interesting about them is that they all have the same pharmacology. They're completely unrelated biologically, but they're called xanthines. In chocolate, it's theobromine and caffeine. In coffee, it's mostly caffeine, and tea, theophylline. So three very different plants and different parts of plants from different parts of the world with very different taste characteristics have this common pharmacology. Now, what happens to those things? Chocolate becomes a bar, a confection, and a beverage. It's mostly a beverage in traditional Mexico, not so much anymore. It's in Europe. It's a very common beverage. Coffee is generally only a beverage, and tea is essentially only a beverage. None of them are eaten in any significant amount in a savory context. This is a really interesting culinary question. These are among the favorite flavors in the world, and yet practically nobody puts them, there are a few exceptions, but practically nobody puts them on savory foods, most of the foods we eat. Why don't we have chocolate flavorings on foods? I was at an event in Philadelphia many years ago that my wife was part of, in which they made all kinds of foods with chocolate added. And my son, who's a molecular gastronomer who creates banquets for people, has done banquets of 10 courses in which every course has chocolate. But that's really weird and rare. So here are the issues that chocolate raises. One, why are chocolate, coffee, and tea so popular as beverages? Is it because of the pharmacology? Probably not just these aromas of the three are very common. Why is chocolate not popular outside of the Western world? And it isn't. Why is chocolate pharmacology so minimal versus coffee? That is, chocolate has a lot of active pharmacology in it, but people don't say, I eat chocolate to wake up in the morning. Nobody does that. But for coffee, they say that. And why is the acceptable context for the xanthines so narrow? Why are they used in beverages and for chocolate desserts? Yes, there are exceptions, but there are very few. And why is chocolate considered unhealthy? By the way, that's amazing, because dark chocolate, of course, is a vegetable product, and it's perfectly good. Doesn't have much sugar in it. So there's all kinds of interesting questions that I can't answer. Here, as many of you thought of when I said chocolate wasn't used in savory dishes, there are a few and only a very few exceptions in Mexico. The mole poblano is one of them. Mole is simply a dish, as you may know, which has a lot of spices in it, an Indian-style dish in which that is Asian Indian, in which many spices are ground up, like in a curry, and stewed with a main course. Here's a picture of a mole, that mole poblano. Chocolate is a prominent part of those dishes, but they're not very popular, and they're a tiny percentage of Mexican foods. So why not? Okay, my last topic is the tomato. Tomato is a third part of the Colombian exchange, and it tastes good. Most people would say the tomato tastes good when they first taste it. Unlike natural chocolate or unlike chili pepper. By the way, I should have mentioned that chocolate in Europe was transformed in many ways through a very complex process with many stages. But included in that was the addition of sugar, which wasn't available until mass amounts of sugar were made in the Western Hemisphere and imported to Europe. And also vanilla was added also. And the Dutch added milk. And milk chocolate, say in this country, is much more popular than dark chocolate. So the bitterness of chocolate was suppressed with sugar and the milk. Okay, here's some nice tomatoes. Some of you may love tomatoes. I happen to love tomatoes. Here are some heritage tomatoes. Many, I think thousands of varieties actually of tomatoes. Most of them developed in Europe. This is a per capita consumption of tomatoes and other vegetables by region. So that you have the regions along the bottom. The green part of the bar is the total vegetable intake other than tomato. And the orange part is the tomato. So you see, North America and Europe are the biggest consumers of tomatoes. And they're not one of the major vegetables in most of the world, though they're consumed. So tomatoes were not nearly as widely adopted as chili peppers. In the USA, just for the record, 70% of people, 70% of tomatoes are consumed at home. It's the fourth most popular home consumed vegetable, behind potatoes, lettuce, and onions. It's the number one consumed vegetable if you include processed foods, ketchup, soup, tomato soup being very popular, and pizza. And it's up because of new varieties all the time and because it's considered a healthy food and with antioxidants, it has vitamins. So it's in the American health movement. But it's a great culinary ingredient, I think you'll all agree. And it, of course, is the part of the flavor principle of the Mediterranean, including Italian food, which is basically tomato and olive oil. And Italian food is the most popular food in the United States. So here's the story of the tomato. It probably comes originally from South America, but gets to Europe via Mexico, by the exploration of Mexico, then gets up to California, goes originally to Spain, all the way around, went to the Philippines, particularly because that was a Spanish colony, goes to Italy, particularly there, they see that arrow, and comes mostly from the eastern United States. It comes back from Europe rather than coming through South America. Heinz and Campbell, two companies that are built around the tomato, and it was one of the pioneer foods for the industrialization of foods, pouring out a lot in quality control products, notably ketchup and tomato soup. Now I want to talk finally about one derivative of tomato, and that's pizza. Now pizza is not all tomatoes. It's one of the components of pizza is tomatoes. Here's the classic pizza, the margherita, with tomato sauce, mozzarella, basil on a wheat-based base. You're all very familiar with this. Pizza in the USA, this was about 10 years ago, there were 61,000 pizzerias in the United States. It is it's part of the most popular ethnic food in the United States. Pizzerias represent 17% of all restaurants in the United States. In fact, my claim is that the most common place you will find of any sort, not just food, if you're dropped anywhere in the United States, the closest thing to you will be a pizzeria. And 93% of Americans eat at least one pizza per month. Each man, woman, and child in America eats an average of 46 slices of pizza per year. Now, it's really made it. It's not an American food. Ironically, the tomato in it comes from the Americas, but not the olive oil, not the cheese, not the wheat. A study was done by Oxfam in which they asked about 1,000 people, reasonably randomly sampled, in different countries, what's their favorite food? In the United States, pizza was number one. 15.2% of people said it was their favorite food. In Mexico, pizza was the 9th favorite food. In Brazil, pizza was the 5th favorite food. In Ghana, it wasn't on the list. Ghana is very much still consuming its traditional cuisine, which is nice to hear that some places like that. South Africa, it was the 2nd favorite food. In the Philippines, it was the 8th favorite food. And in Spain, it was the 4th favorite food. So this is really up there. Pizza, and in India, even in India, it's the 8th favorite food. Now, I don't know how many of you know Google Ngram, but Google Ngram is one, if you don't know it, is one of the greatest toys to play with. It's just capital Ngram, and you just put it in and you get this program comes up, and it's extremely easy to use. You just put any word you want. By the way, it can be other languages in English. And what Google did was scan all the books in the University of Michigan and Stanford libraries. And you can search those books through Google Ngram. So, and you can go back to 1600. Here's a plot I made. This took literally 5 seconds to make on that plot. 1800 to 2000, the frequency of the words, of all, what percent of all English words are pizza, tomato, or ketchup? So if you look at 2000, you'll see tomato was pretty high. This is frequency, remember, relative frequency compared to all words. Pizza is very high. Ketchup, moderately high. And interesting, look at pizza. You'll notice that pizza wasn't on the map until the 1950s. And that's the amazing thing about pizza, that pizza was not part of our food until after World War II. Here comes from Google Ngram again. This is the frequency, relative frequency of the word pizza in Spain, in Italy, France, and the United States. You can see it was down there 0 in 1950, even in Italy. Because in Italy, pizza came from Naples. It was only consumed in Naples. It wasn't used in the rest of Italy until World War II basically spread people all over the place in Italy because of the invasion of Italy. And you can see that we're far and away the most frequent use of the word compared to Italians and French. So here's the map I showed you before in black of the spread of the tomato. And now from Naples, pizza spreads out to all over the world, including northern Italy, by the way, including the whole world. Pizza is becoming the world's favorite food. I think it will be clearly the world's favorite food. I don't make predictions, but it's growing everywhere. And once China and India get on the game, I don't have data on China, but India is already growing for pizza. And why is pizza such a great food? My guess is because it has all kinds of features. It has texture contrast between the crust and the soft cheese, which if you have teeth, which a lot of people in the world don't, is a very appealing feature. The tomato taste is very appealing. The crust is appealing. The cheese has the soft melt. It has a lot of different qualities that make it a special. And by the way, in spite of what people say, it's actually a pretty healthy food. It's a food made of cheese, tomato, and wheat. I mean, and olive oil. Okay. So here are some issues this raises, raised by the talk I've given. Chili peppers and tomatoes are flavor principles. Why? Why did they become so commonly used as flavoring of foods? Why is chocolate only a beverage in confection? Why didn't chocolate become a flavoring? Would you have started, if you knew what originally, what these substances were in Mexico, would you have made this prediction? I don't think so. Why has pizza become a staple in the world? Why this food has become so popular? This food, which of course incorporates our tomato. So I think what I'm going to do is stop there and take some questions. I can talk some more about other foods that came from the Americas, but let's stop here and take questions.
Okay, thank you. We do have one question that just came in. It is, was pre-Columbian chocolate a sweetened drink?
As far as we know, no. Now, the pre-Columbians did not have sugar easily available. Sugar, was not easily available in the world until the production of sugar cane. It came from honey, and beets were not, that technology wasn't well developed. So the Mexicans didn't have a source of sweetener. It was, as far as we know, eaten in the bitter form with hot pepper. I mean, that's one of the great puzzles.
When was the sweetener introduced then in Europe? Is that?
Well, the sweetener, yeah, honey was already used in Europe. Bees come from Europe,
Yes.
honeybees. So they had honey. It was very popular, but they couldn't, it's expensive. It's hard to get. So the big thing that happened was that they discovered, because Europe hasn't any tropical areas, that they could grow sugarcane in the United States. And that made sugarcane cheap. And that changed everything. That had to do with the adoption of coffee too, because coffee came into Europe from the Middle East, and it was bitter. And most people don't like pretty bitter things. Some people get to like them, but when you put the sugar in, you suppress the bitter and it tastes much better. Now, some people, as you know, get to like bitter, just as most people get to like hot pepper, get to burn. And when they get to like bitter, they can drink black coffee without sugar or cream. But nobody starts drinking coffee that way, in that very distasteful form.
I see. We have another question. It is, how immediately accepted in Europe was the tomato? I seem to
Not
recall
immediately accepted.
some reluctance. Being a nightshade. Is this
Yes,
a
it was
myth?
a nightshade. It's in a family of other things. It's in the family of eggplant, by the way, but it's also in the family of some things which are known to be toxic. And I think the bright redness was a sort of put people off a little bit. It isn't bright red in nature, but it was cultivated by the Mexicans and the Europeans to be bright red. So it wasn't accepted automatically. Of course, the Mediterranean eventually accepted it. It was never accepted big time in Northern Europe. And by the way, another food from the Americas, potatoes were not accepted initially either. Now, potatoes and tomatoes are two of the great nutritional foods in the world. I mean, they're not just, just nice little adornments. They're fundamental foods. And so it's quite surprising. Corn, by the way, was, I think, more widely accepted originally. Corn, of course, has a mild taste. The thing about corn is that it's easy. It's the easiest food to grow. You get more yield of calories per acre from corn than from any other food. But what was interesting about this, if I had more time, I would have told you this, but when corn was brought back by the Europeans, the explorers to Europe, they didn't bring back the preparation of corn, which is the tortilla, the Mexican preparation. Tortillas are a great food. They don't last very long, and they get stale quickly, and they don't taste that good. But why didn't they bring back the recipe for tortillas? And the reason is simple: they didn't have a woman. There were no women among the early explorers, and men in Mexico don't know how to make tortillas. So this great recipe. If this recipe had gone to Europe, I think the history of European cuisine would have been different. Corn in Europe is used primarily as an animal food. It doesn't get used much for people. And that's because of this historic, one of the many examples where the absence of exclusion of women from some activity had a big impact on history.
Okay, here's another question regarding sweeteners. If bees came to the Americas from Europe, what was used in pre-Columbus as a sweetener, since presumably
I
honey
can't
wasn't
answer that
available.
question. It's a good question. There are, of course, naturally sweetish foods like fruit. So, for example, when you, in modern cuisine, use fruit on duck, when you cook duck with apricots or something, you're sweetening the duck with a natural fruit. So but I don't think that's done that much. It's done a lot, for example, in Persian cuisine, where they use fruits, especially apricots, in savory dishes. It's not that characteristic of Mexican food.
What
So
about reduced saps? Were they available as sweeteners?
reduced what?
Sap.
Oh,
fluid fruit.
you, as far as I know, no. Now you could, of course, reduce fruit. I don't know if they did that. You could dry fruit, and then you get something really sweet, like a dried. In this case, it would be. But you see, most of the fruits came from the east, like the citrus fruits, the apricot. I don't know about the peach. I expect the peach came from the east too, but I'm not sure.
Here's another that involves fruit. Question is, can you elaborate on the combination of tropical fruits and chili? I believe they're sold and enjoyed in Mexico and other Latin American countries.
Well, let me just say that it's not common. It's not a common snack. It is a snack. I showed you an example in the village I was at of pineapples and hot pepper. Generally speaking, people don't make beverages with hot pepper in the world. In fact, they don't in Mexico either, even though it's originally that way. So in Mexico, for example, if you get Doritos or potato chips, they have more chili pepper in than they do in the United States. But their sodas, they're big consumers of soda. And they don't ever put chili pepper in it, as far as I know. So there seems to be, just like we sort of have a rule, right, that you don't add much sugar to savory foods. There are exceptions, but we have that. Sugar goes in another part of our dietary, mostly desserts. So the world seems to be like that in general, with some exceptions like Iran, Persian food, and a few others.
Okay, here's a question about tomatoes. Was there an individual associated with popularizing tomatoes the way Parmentier is with the potato?
Not that I know of. There's a fellow named Pick, an American, who was very much involved in the transformation of the tomato, which is a little currant size. Wild tomatoes are a little currant size berry. He was more involved than anyone else in the creation of the modern tomato, which is the big red one. I don't know of it, if a particular person was. It's a good question. There may be such a person.
One more about sweeteners. Was agave widely used as a sweetener?
I don't know where agave comes from offhand.
Okay.
Let me just show you, by the way, I just want to show you one thing about corn. That is a picture. If I was going to talk, that's a picture. This is size calibrated. The thing on the left is the wild teosinte, what corn comes from. It still grows in Mexico. And the thing on the right is the corn cob. Look at the enormous difference there that humans produced. And that production involved breeding it to change about 6 genes. One gene, by the way, was to keep it from spreading exploding and spreading the seeds all over the place, to keep them on the cob. Obviously, a lot of changes were made. So we've really, one of the things I'm interested in, I didn't talk about here, is that why people consider corn a natural food. It's not at all natural, look at this. But they think that wheat with one gene change to make it more drought resistant is a totally unnatural food. So people change 6 genes in corn over millennia and produce this enormous change, and that's considered natural. That's just sort of a peculiarity of the way people think of natural, but that's not what we're talking about now.
Thank you. Another question just came up. Observation is that I believe Thomas Jefferson got people to eat tomatoes in colonial America. He demonstrated you could eat tomatoes and not get sick. They were previously thought of as poisonous.
Yes, I think that I've read that. I think it's probably true that Thomas Jefferson played that role, and there was a great suspicion. Remember, I think tomatoes came. We don't know this for sure. To Thomas Jefferson from Europe, not from Mexico. But yeah, there was a lot of suspicion about tomatoes, and why there was so much suspicion is not clear. But he did play a role, and he grew them. He was a farmer, and he grew them and ate them and publicized what he was doing. Whether he was the first person to do it, I don't know, but he certainly was a prominent person to do it.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions we have at this point.
Okay. Well, I hope you learned. I mean, some of the stuff you probably knew, but I hope you learned some things here.
Oh, many. Speaking only for myself, yeah, that was terrific. Thank you very much. I suspect it's a good time for you to unshare your screen. So
okay, I'll be glad to.
But please don't leave us. And then Pam, were you going to pick up next?
Okay, so I'm gonna, I guess, say goodbye as you have your. I just want to say that I like to talk to culinary historians. Okay. I don't have to explain why these things are interesting to you.
Not to me, no.
So good luck to you, and I admire the kind of organization you have.
Okay, thank you so much.
Perhaps on another time you could come back. All
right. I'll add my thanks. I thought it was really interesting. I mean, I'm somebody who's probably guilty of at least one pizza a month, so I thought the pizza facts were fascinating. And also chocolate's something I can't live without. So I'll add that to, I'm not, I hadn't thought about not waking up to chocolate, but certainly I think I have it every day in one form or another. I'm gonna do some CHow related business announcements, and then we'll do some, move on to what's it's.
Okay, can I just make one? I'm gonna stop recording this now.
Okay.
The presentation is all saved to the cloud, fingers crossed, but I don't see any need to memorialize the odd bits of business, but please continue now.
Okay. First, I want to extend a huge thank you to Margie Gibb